This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil-dependent governments are coming under pressure from the lowest crude prices since the COVID-19 pandemic, with officials preparing policy responses for a drop in revenue such as issuing more debt and reducing spending. Brent crude plunged more than 15% in the days following U.S. President Donald Trump's aggressive tariffs, as the escalating trade war between the U.S. and China spurred worries about recession and energy demand. The same week, the OPEC Plus cartel put forward a plan to increase supply next month. Brent sank below $60 a barrel, falling to the lowest level since February 2021.
Brent and West Texas Intermediate crude climbed more than $1 on Friday after U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said the United States could end Iran's oil exports as part of an effort to bring the Islamic Republic to terms over its nuclear program. Brent crude futures settled at $64.76 a barrel, up $1.43, or 2.26%. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude finished at $61.50 a barrel, up $1.43 or 2.38%. Strict enforcement of restrictions on Iranian crude exports would reduce global supply, said Andrew Lipow, president of Lipow Oil Associates. I suspect China will continue to buy oil from Iran.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Countries at the UN Shipping Agency struck a deal on Friday on a global fuel emissions standard for the maritime sector that will impose an emissions fee on ships that breach it and reward vessels burning cleaner fuels. The US pulled out of the climate talks at the International Maritime Organization in London this week, urging other countries to do the same and threatening to impose reciprocal measures against any fees charged on US ships. Despite that, a majority of countries approved the CO2 cutting measures to help meet the IMO's target to cut net emissions from international shipping by 20% by 2030 and eliminate them by 2050.
U.S. energy firms this week cut oil rigs by the most in a week since June 2023, lowering the total oil and natural gas rig count for a third consecutive week, energy services firm Baker Hughes said in its closely followed report on Friday. The oil and gas rig count, an early indicator of future output, fell by 7 to 583 in the week to April 11, the biggest weekly decline since June 2024. Baker Hughes said this week's decline puts the total rig count down 34 rigs, or 6% below this time last year. Baker Hughes said oil rigs fell by 9 to 480 this week, while gas rigs rose by 1 to 97. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Gold prices vaulted over the $3,200 per ounce mark for the first time on Friday, as intensifying U.S.-China trade tensions rattled global markets and drove investors into the metal seen as a refuge from uncertainty. Spot gold hit a record of $3,245.28 per ounce on Friday, having broken multiple records already so far this year. Bullion has gained around 23% since January due to geopolitical uncertainties, central bank demand and increased flows into gold-backed exchange-traded funds.
Copper and other base metals were on track to finish a very volatile week on the rise in London on Friday, supported by a weaker dollar, though gains were capped by the potential for trade conflict between the US and China to curb demand. Benchmark 3-month copper on the London Metal Exchange was up 2.0% at $9,166.50 a metric ton by 16:22 GMT. The metal used widely in power and construction is up 4.5% this week after hitting a multi-month low of $8,105 a ton on Monday as tariff sparring between the world's two largest economies fueled global recession fears.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Vegetable oil inventories in India fell to its lowest level in more than 3 years as palm oil imports in March stayed below average for the fourth straight month, a leading trade body said on Friday. Depleted stocks could force the world's biggest buyer of vegetable oils to increase imports of palm oil and soy oil in the coming months, supporting Malaysian palm oil prices and U.S. soy oil futures. Vegetable oil stocks at the start of April 1st fell 11.3% from a month ago to 1.67 million metric tons, the lowest since December 2021, the Solvent Extractors Association of India said in a statement.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.